Hello folks, and welcome. I'm Christy Nicholas, and I will be reading the first scene from my novel Age of Saints today. Age of Saints is book 7 of 9 in my Druid's Brooch series. It's set in 520 AD Ireland. Please remember to click like and subscribe, and do let me know what you think of the scene in the comments. Without further ado, Age of Saints. Chapter 1. Connacht Anduin, Meath, Hibernia, 520 AD. Conall grunted with effort, struggling to lift the heavy stone block into place. As he pushed it in the precisely cut space, he scraped his fingers and panted once it fit flush against the edge. His legs ached, and he shifted his posture until he could stand at a different angle, alleviating the pain. He wiped sweat and his curly black hair from his eyes with an already soaked rag, glancing to his stepfather, Setna, for approval. The tall, blond, burly man chuckled as he traced the thin line between the blocks, the dappled sunlight shining through the trees in a shifting pattern. "Not bad, young man, not bad. Now, cut 5 more like that, place them in their spots, and we'll be done for the day." Setna whistled for his deer hound. When the gangly grey dog bounded to his master, he played with the dog for a few moments before he settled on the wall to observe Conall prepare the next stone. With a cough to clear the stone dust from his parched throat, Conall sat on the low stool in front of the rough-dressed blocks. He marked the edges to be cut with his chalk, whistling a sprightly tune as he worked. The scent of stone dust tickled his nose, and he rubbed furiously to keep from sneezing. Both Setna and his hound, Grarhund, watched intently as Conall chiseled the sides of the stone block, sanded them smooth, and wrestled the heavy thing to the half-built stone wall. As he dug his fingers beneath the block, Conall lifted one edge, and the dog scampered around him, distracting him from his task. He wished Setna would call the hound away, but he daren't spend attention on the beast. With only a few scraped knuckles, he managed to get the block high enough to lift it from the ground, inching it toward the spot on the wall, waiting for the next stone. A sudden bark startled him, and his grip slipped. Despite scrambling to catch hold, the block slid away from him. He had no strength to stop the stone from falling, and Grarhound's sharp yelp made him wince in sympathy. The dog sprinted away, whining as he ran. At least the dog could run, which salved Conall's worst fears. Setna thundered over him, and he welcomed the pain when his stepfather boxed his ears. "Pay attention, you dolt! You could have killed Grarhund. I'm off to check his leg, and you'd better finish your chore before supper." After his stepfather stalked off, Conall sat on the offending stone, his head in his hands, upset and worried for the dog. He noticed no blood on the ground. He hoped he'd not hurt the poor thing too badly. With a deep sigh and a glance toward where the hound ran off with his master, he stood to finish this stone. While he greatly appreciated his stepfather's instruction and knowledge, Conall preferred to work alone, out from under any scrutiny. He worked much more quickly when no one watched. Now he must lift the errant block into its place on the wall. His eyes flicked all around the small clearing to ensure no one watched. While closing his eyes, he drew upon the power of his father's brooch. While the artifact remained well hidden in his sleeping alcove, he only needed to concentrate his will upon the magical object to call its strength to him. He willed the magic to flow through the ground, into his feet, up his legs, and out of his hands, making his fingers tingle. This surge made him grow dizzy, but he braced himself against the power and directed it to the newly cut stone. With the gentle touch of practiced magic, the stone drifted to the wall and settled into its waiting place with a scrape. Conall opened his eyes and grinned. Practice made perfect, and when his grandfather didn't lurk about, he could wield his magic with impunity. Conall whirled at a rustle behind him, frightened his power had been discovered, but the chittering of a squirrel reassured him no human witnessed his antics. The squirrel darted away, and he sighed with relief. His father had warned him to always keep their secret close. Conall swallowed a sudden surge of melancholy at the thought of his father. While Setna cared for him, his sister, and their mother, Conall wished his father hadn't disappeared 2 years before. He missed him with all his heart. He shoved away the memory of those heartbreaking days and wiped the sweat from his forehead as he bent to work the next stone. A few dry, lonely leaves drifted from the autumn trees. One landed on his stone, and he brushed it away. He sat at the next stone and picked up his chalk. He had 3 more stones to carve and place before he could collect Lainn and return home for supper. Conall's hand trembled as he marked out the lines. He grunted with dissatisfaction, rubbed out the chalk, and drew again. 3 times he drew the lines before they looked as straight as he could make them. Finally, he rolled his eyes and reached for the mason's pouch of tools Setna had lent him. He'd almost forgotten the string. He rubbed the chalk along the thin jute rope, holding it taut against the side of the stone. With the lower end secured by his foot, he snapped the rope against the stone surface, causing the chalk to leave a faint line, straight as an arrow's flight. Conall grinned at the clever trick, as he did every time he used it. In short order, he'd marked the rest of the stone's sides and carefully returned the string to his pouch. The freshly sharpened chisel and small hammer offered no tricks or shortcuts, so he spent the next hour carving the stone and refining the edge to fit into the wall. His sweat had become coated with stone dust, making his skin gritty and itchy. Once he'd dressed the stone, he brushed the stone dust away and surveyed his success. Then, after a quick glance around, he lightly lifted it into place with his magic, taking a moment to wipe down his face and hands. With a long-suffering sigh, he sat at the 4th stone. Before he finished the last stone, the sun had dipped considerably lower in the sky, behind the dappled canopy of autumn trees. He ran his fingers along the fine cracks, as Setna had, marveling at the fine work he'd finally achieved. For 2 years he'd practiced under his stepfather's exacting tutelage. While Setna remained a tough taskmaster, he taught well. Conall brushed away another coating of dust and smiled, proud of his work. With a quick glance at the lowering sun, he gathered his mason tools and wrapped them in the leather-strapped bag. He'd better hurry if he wanted to meet Lainn at the crossroads. The half-hour walk along the edge of the bog offered him little challenge, as he'd been exploring this area for many years. They hadn't been born here, but had moved when his father found the great fishing in Anvoin, the river which ran past the ancient bogland. Conall didn't remember why they'd left his previous home, as he'd been too young to know much beyond their move. His sister Lainn had only been a baby. While she'd been a merry, laughing child, his little sister grew more annoying with each year. He had been heartily grateful when the Druids had accorded her the signal honor of studying with them. Every day she spent time in their oak grove, learning histories, songs, and chants. She'd used this knowledge to torment him often, though he wouldn't let on how interesting he found the tales. If she realized he actually enjoyed them, she'd instantly stop. He spied her dark auburn curls bouncing as she jumped, trying to reach a yellow apple which hung from a low branch. He chuckled at her predicament and reached above her, calmly plucking the prize and taking a big bite. The last 2 years of growth meant he towered a full foot over his younger sister. He'd seen 17 winters, but she'd only had 16. "That's my apple, Conall. You've no right." He shrugged. "Taller people get the better apples, Mouse. Height is right. You know I hate that name. Give it. When she kicked at his shin, he skipped back, holding the apple above his head and out of her reach. You can't catch me. She growled and charged him as he laughed and ran. He spied another apple and picked it up as he skipped by so she'd have a treat when she tired of chasing him. Lainn came so close to grabbing his malblatha, so he put on a burst of speed. It would do no good to let her win. He wove through the trees, zigzagging, until even he panted for breath. When he finally stopped near a small stream, she limped up, her freckled face red and sweating. Conall offered the second apple as a peace offering, with a wide grin. His sister growled at him before snatching it from his hand. They crunched the sweet fruit in silence, as the trickling brook sang in the evening air. Bees buzzed around them, making Conall swat one away from his face. Don't hurt him. He blinked at his sister. Him? Blood and bones, Lainn. It's a bee, not a person. You should be kind to bees. Athna says so. Athna's madder than a drunken hare, Lainn. She shrugged and took a final bite of her apple. That doesn't mean he's wrong. Are you done yet? He tossed his core into the stream. Sure. Ready to go home? She gave him a sly smile. Not yet. I made a promise. Follow me? As she ran off to the north, the opposite direction from their home, he rolled his eyes and ran after her. He'd worked hard all day and had little energy or patience for his sister's antics. He realized her education with the Druids must be less physically demanding than his own training as a mason, and she still had the endless energy of youth. With a groan and a protest from his aching leg muscles, he felt every one of his 17 winters as she led him on a merry chase through the glades. Thank you so much for enjoying this excerpt. Please remember to like and subscribe to my channel. I have first scenes from my other novels for you to enjoy. You can get your copy of Age of Saints on my publisher's website, www.tierpub.com/C Nicholas. That's TIRPUB/CNICHOLAS. Thank you so much and enjoy.